Hey folks, Happy New Year. Welcome to 2020. I hope you had a relaxing holiday. I had a very nice break. Got to go down to Florida, play some golf with my parents and my son, get my butt kicked by my mom in pickleball, play some tennis. It was great. But I'm back, I'm refreshed, I'm ready to go. The hopper is pretty full of some nice projects to work on here this month, so I'm very pumped for what's ahead. So I thought I would kick it off with a little walkthrough today of a session I did a few weeks ago. It was an animated short, about 2 minutes long, and there's a cute little character that meets a new friend, and his other friends are highly skeptical of this new friend right away. But they go out partying, dancing, and sure enough, pretty soon the little guy realizes that his new friend is bad news, like really bad news. And by the end of the video, the new friend is literally torturing the other friends. So it's a little dark, it's a little odd, definitely kind of a horror component to it, even though it's this cute little animated thing. So I thought one of the cool ways into it musically would be to do a small string quartet sort of approach, a little bit modern, using alternative articulations and scraping, sliding, different techniques. So I started there, and using smaller solo and smaller string sections, and as I get into it, I found myself using larger and larger sounds, from the Spitfire symphony and the Zimmer collection, the BBC. So it was coincidental because right when I was working on this is when Spitfire released their aperture string ensemble, which at low dynamics is a small group, and then as you open that dynamics up, it goes to a larger section, which is a really cool concept. So that's kind of what my piece does. It starts out a little smaller, and then by the end it's a full big group. So I'm going to walk you through it. I know the title's a little clickbaity. This is not meant to be a commercial for Spitfire. It's just you could do this with any collection of samples, obviously, where you have a choice between smaller groups and bigger groups and combining them in interesting ways. But I think I used almost all of their libraries that has a string component to it. So that's pretty funny. And I'll walk you through it, and you can see how I'm using some of the LCO textures, the British drama, to add a really nice, interesting, emotional horror type component. So that's what we have on tap today. I've had some people make some suggestions that they want to see some specific modular content, so I'm going to cue some of that up here coming up. And if you have any other things you'd like me to focus on, let me know, whether it's on the scoring side or electronic music side, and I'm happy to explore whatever you have in mind. So let's do it. If I was gonna take this to final, I would probably record a small group playing the main melodic elements, and then my intention was to say use the cello player after that, and just sit around and experiment with these different moments where there are string effects happening, and try to find some experimental things that she could do to add on top of what's happening here. Maybe there'll be an excuse to do that at some point, but for now, I think it works, with just the samples that are happening. And you can kind of hear how, especially with some of the more alternative collections they have, say from the LCO or the British drama, you can see some examples of how you can use those to steer your track in a different direction. So I think what I'll do is kind of walk through it piece by piece,
solo some things, and then I'll play it down at the end if you want to hear it. And then I'll also put a link up later if for some strange reason you want to. I don't know why you'd want to listen to this later, but at any rate. So this piece was actually part of a larger presentation for this short film, and I did 4 different genres for the film. This particular string approach, I did an 80s synth take on it, of course, with my hardware synths. I did kind of a more traditional orchestral / sound design horror sound, and then I did a gypsy twisted song for it. So I'm gonna make a SoundCloud playlist of those, and I'll link to that below if you want to check that out. Just as an overview, again, I've talked about this in the past, but I like to see a lot of people do this, but I like to go through and kind of spot the piece in the marker lane, and that's what you're seeing in the top here. What I want to happen and in each section, and then you can, under marker, you can say convert to arrangement markers, and then it'll flip it up to this arrangement lane, free up the marker lane, then to go in and put down, what my key changes are, the harmonic pattern, and any notes if there are other things that I want to happen. But here it's just the kind of the chord changes. So starts out kind of eerie, and let's play the first little section. So the intro, these are the LCO strings, which have a very papery, dry, brittle sound, and it doesn't work for many things, but it worked here. So those are just the woozy vibe violins. And then I've got, like I mentioned earlier, the British drama strings. And these are, I actually use these quite a lot. So you can select the individual articulations, but I like this patch where you have, depending on how hard you play, you've got these sustains where there's variation to the sustain. You go a little harder into the soft, and then loud. So you can hear the bowing. This gives more realism and emotion to the sound. And then lastly, I use the cellos again from the LCO, the original LCO, and this is more of a similar sound as the other one, kind of a twitchy. So that's what's happening in the beginning. And then a little pulse comes in. Still have the violin drama happening. So the pulse is an example of where I took the studio strings, which are it's kind of a medium-sized ensemble, I think, and recorded in a very dry setting. So you really get the attack of the sound, a lot of bite. So that's just the studio strings that start it. And then along with those, I used the new Zimmer articulations that they released, the shorts. This is the spiccato. So it starts out pretty lightly, and this is a good example of it gets louder. Not as loud as I thought. And so that's happening, and there are basses kind of quietly underneath. So that's what's happening with the pulses. Together, those three sound like this. So you have a little space from the basses and the cellos, which are larger groups, but the studio cellos are giving it a little more bite. So, and I also I think I mentioned before this is that pinhole library just softly in there. I'm not sure what this is adding. So it's a little higher. just comes in on the higher octave. And I think the violins from the Virtuoso solo library are also doing that. Nope, just a regular solo. That sounds like this. So we're very solo, very exposed. And I didn't use hardly any additional reverb on this track. I used a fair amount of compression on individual tracks, which, just touching it, which I think helps bring out the room sound of the recordings and also gives it a little more bite. But yeah, very, very little additional reverb. So this section, and the melody is a combination of the studio legato cellos with the close mics and solo violas. See what the mics are there. Yeah, I tend to go with the close mics quite a lot when I'm using those. So together the melody is like this. And then more combination of the studio and the solos doing the little line at the end there. And then we get in some of the more effecty stuff starts to come in. So to help that transition, this gliss that's happening, I bet that's from... So Albion 4 is a collection of alternative articulations, big groups, big hits, all from strings, brass, or woodwinds. And it's kind of strange how it's a little bit old school, how it's laid out. The way that this Albion 4 is laid out, they give you these menu. It's a little old school. They give you these menu patches in different categories. So say you have stabs, tonal, and so they have the different, and it shows you there on the screen the title of each one and the number. And if you find one you like, you can either use that as is, or if it's a tonal sound especially, you can look that up. So that's 13. Go into the individual sounds, stabs, tonal, 13, and then you can load that one up. And if it's... Okay, that one's not. But if it had pitch spread across as an option, you would get that, and then you could play it in the key that you're in. But some of them are not very, even though that one says tonal, that's more of a cluster, so it doesn't really give you options. But anyways, that's Albion 4 is great for effects and things. So in this case, it has that gliss that's happening as kind of a transition element. It's like... So it's kind of blended in there to get into this new section. Then we get into the oompa moment. Kind of the similar section as before. So you've got the spiccato things happening and more melodies. Then it starts to get a little bigger. I think that's the only place I use the BBC in this, is the melody of these violins here. The legatos in the BBC, the programming is just great. The solo that. Yeah, really nice articulations in there. Then things start to go off the rails a little bit, and so here's more Albion 4. These weird violin scrapes underneath there, and okay. And this is not as intelligent as some of those other libraries where you can time the end of it. You've got to kind of mess around with it to get it to time out like you want. So that's in the background. The rise. Kind of sting at the end. That is coming from the, also Albion 4. So then things come down a little bit, kind of a moment of reflection. I really like these brushed strings from Albion 5. Very delicate. And Albion 5 is the one where they use huge groups of strings but play very quietly on the edge of silence, as they like to joke, I guess. More of the drama, British drama stuff. So these are the cellos. So you can really hear the bowing, along with flautando. From the chamber strings. So together, you can kind of hear how those together. And then across the top are some of the more affected sounds. And the Zimmer harmonics, what's that doing? Yeah. Very Star Wars. And there's a low note that comes in at the end of this section. And then more of the "all my friends are being tortured" scene comes in. The Bartok are from the studio strings, just the cellos. Give it some percussion. And the violas are from the Zimmer. Yeah, and I don't think there's any additional reverb on that. That's just the sound of the recording. Not even any compression. And you have a fast line that comes in. So the that fast line starts out in just a studio, and then the Zimmer strings join it. So that's just studio, and then the Zimmer violins as it gets a little larger. I'm doubling it up top. And then we get into more of the effects as it kind of comes to a climax. So there's some really cool stabs in here. This is probably also from Albion 4. Getting a little bit psycho on us. And so together that's pretty good stuff. Let's listen to those. Little lag there, but those are angular strings. So this uses their Evo layout where you can set different articulations for different key ranges, which is kind of handy to be able to do. And then what do we have? Let me come out of there. The The rise is probably the angular strings. And then the low hit. More of the Albion 4. And then it's the end, kind of wrapping things up, kind of a low-key vibe. There are the pinhole strings. Let's hear that. So at the low, dynamics, very small group. And it expands, but that's a pretty... And then behind this section, there's still a little bit of a dark horror concept, so I think there's still... little tension from that, and then also from the angular strings. So those are going on behind this lighter melodic thing. And this is examples. So I used the pizzicatos from the symphonic library because in this case I wanted them to be softer, set more in the back and less in your face. So those work nicely. They're just lightly back there. And then the brush strings again. Yeah, so that's it. So why don't we play it down from the top? All right. So there's one other thing I wanted to mention. If you're in Logic, a handy trick, because for a lot of these string sounds, it's not just a matter of quantizing them and getting them to always fall where you want. So Option plus or minus is your friend to poke things around to get them to fit right, to get them to feel right rhythmically. So I find I'm using that quite a lot. And somewhere it gives you the option. Where is that? Yeah, so if you go to Edit and Move, you can, so if you go to Edit, Move, you can select what you want the ratio to be the amount you're nudging it when you hit Option arrow to the left or right. So that comes in. That's a nice little shortcut when you're working with anything rhythmically. If you want to nudge things around to get them to fit into the pocket in the right way. So, and again, there was hardly any additional reverb on this. And pretty light mastering, kind of my usual mastering chain. This kind of Lindell transformer, just to give it a little warmth, just barely touching it with the, really to control the bass, the multiband compressor, just touching it with the Shadow Hills. And then on my second mastering chain. So, and I've talked about this in the past too, where in Logic, especially for mastering plugs, if you split them between two different channels, you can spread the CPU load between your different cores. So it's a way to get around maxing out a single core, because every plug that's on a single channel can only exist on one core. So if you spread it out, you can avoid that maxing out one of the cores. So the Shadow Hills, and then on the other one I have the Vertigo, just giving it a little bit of a spread. So that's the mid side, and just a little harmonic distortion on the sides to pull it out. Let's hear that without. So it just widens it a little bit. It's quite a lot. I love that thing. A little Araband from the Moog, and then just some light limiting. That's what's happening. So thanks for watching.